this video, I wanted to talk about getting bored out or burned out from powerlifting. I've been in the sport for 8 years, and in that time I've seen a lot of people come and go, as most people don't tend to stay in the sport for longer than 2 years. Now, powerlifting is inherently a pretty monotonous sport, as we're really only training 3 movements, which makes it quite easy to get burned out from. Now, there's nothing inherently bad with quitting powerlifting, as everybody is free to do what they want. But I personally see lifting weights as a lifelong journey with many benefits, and therefore I think it's a shame for people to quit doing something that they enjoyed so much at one point, and also so many health benefits. So in this video, I'd like to walk you through a couple reasons on why people tend to quit powerlifting and what we can do to prevent that from happening. One of the biggest reasons people get burned out of powerlifting is because of injuries. And especially injuries that are hard to train around and affect your day-to-day life. There's few things that can suck the life out of your training enjoyment more than injuries that are hard to get over and also affect your day-to-day life. I think most people can handle short-term injuries pretty well, but where it gets frustrating for most people is when injuries take months to get over, especially when you're also experiencing pain in your life outside of the gym. And I totally get how frustrating this can be, as last year I personally dealt with a calf injury that would hurt whenever I would do any sort of squat or even stand up from the couch. So you can imagine my frustration. I think during those times the most helpful thing is being able to shift your focus and your mindset in a way where you can still enjoy your training while also creating a plan to get over the injury. So for instance, maybe you have a knee injury preventing you from properly training your squat, but in that case just focus more on your deadlift and your bench press and train those extra hard, while at the same time creating a plan for yourself or with an expert to rehab your injury and get you back to proper training your squat again. I think the most important thing with injuries is taking ownership of your training and rehab, so you don't end up frustrating yourself. And sometimes this process takes a lot of time, but in that case, give it the time that it actually needs, because otherwise you'll only end up frustrating yourself more and more. Another point is people training too specific. Powerlifting training too specific too often, which can cause people to get bored out with the sport. This also kind of comes back to the first point, as a lot of injuries come from training with very high specificity all the time, which can result in overuse injuries from constantly being in the same movement patterns over and over. I think that for a lot of people, their first bout of high specificity training is probably a lot of fun, as it will probably result in them making lots of progress from never having trained with that style before. But everyone eventually gets to a point where progress starts to slow down. And if you're not constantly setting PRs, then highly specific training probably starts to get boring quite quickly. Like I said at the start of the video, this sport is inherently pretty monotonous, but there's definitely things we can do to make our training more interesting. The main thing is to just have some more variation in your program. Maybe you replace your barbell bench with a dumbbell bench press. Do some high bar or front squats. Or maybe just scale back your compound lifts so you can do more accessories or some more bodybuilding work. These are all things we can do to make our training more interesting. And while they might not make us stronger at our competition lifts in the short term, they will improve our general strength, which will help us in the long run once we get back to more specific training. Another point that might lead to people getting bored out or burned out is not making progress. So I wanted to talk about people hitting plateaus or not making progress, which is something that I think every powerlifter has to face at some point in their powerlifting career, especially as a more advanced athlete. Same thing with injuries. I think most people can handle not setting PRs for a couple of months, but as you get more advanced, sometimes you can go a year or even multiple years where a lift just doesn't seem to improve. Both my squat and bench press each had a period of about 1.5 years where I wasn't able to set a PR. In these cases, I think it's also important to be able to shift your focus and mindset so you don't get frustrated, because constantly trying to PR and missing it is even more frustrating. Instead, try and take a step back and analyze what you need to do differently. Because if you haven't set a PR for a year, then whatever you're doing clearly isn't working and something needs to change. Maybe you need to work in your form. Maybe you need to do more training volume or less training volume. Maybe you need to get just Maybe you just need to get more muscular, gain some weight. Maybe you need to work on a specific weak point with some variations or accessories. Whatever it is, take your time with it to build up whatever it is you need to build up, as this will also give you some indicators that you're getting stronger, without actually setting a new 1 rep max. Before I get into some more solutions for these problems, I'd like to mention that it's important to discuss these things with your coach, because he or she should be able to help you with all of these problems. That's what they're there for. You don't need to prove anything to your coach, so don't be afraid to discuss your frustrations with them, as they're there to help you. So make sure to keep that in mind. So I think all the previously mentioned problems and frustrations basically boil down to one single point, which is that they hinder our training enjoyment. And one of the best things we can do to improve our training enjoyment is to focus on the process. Like I mentioned before, you're not going to be setting PRs all the time forever, so you don't want to limit your training enjoyment to just that. Instead, try and focus on enjoying the process of training. And this is something that's very commonly talked about, but that's because it is so important to be able to enjoy your training while also making it sustainable and productive. So try and focus on process-oriented goals, like putting in effort, showing up, doing your rehab, small goals with accessories, variations, and things like that. Things that will eventually feed into the larger goals, but will mainly make your training a lot more enjoyable. One thing that can make your training more enjoyable and sustainable is just not competing too often. And this ties all the earlier mentioned issues and solutions together. Because if you're competing every 3 months, then you're probably also training very specific, maybe not making that much progress, as you're peaking all the time and never really building your strength, because you're always trying to peak your strength. And maybe you're also just not quite getting over that nagging injury. But for instance, if we were to only compete about every 5 to 6 months, that gives us a lot more time to kind of scale back to heavy lifting, do some more variations, accessory work, while also being able to give your nagging injury the time that it really needs. This in turn will probably make your training more enjoyable and sustainable. The last point I wanted to make is that I think it's important to have a hobby that's not related to lifting weights. Because if your entire life revolves around lifting weights and training isn't going well, then it might feel like your entire life is falling apart. And I think this is important because there will be times where training isn't going well. And where it's not the outlet that it usually is, then it's good to have something else to turn to. Because otherwise, there's nothing left. So take it from me, as almost my entire life revolves around lifting weights. But whether it's video games, board games, painting, building stuff, doesn't really matter. You simply want to have another hobby or outlet to turn to for times that you can train like you want to. And those periods will happen. So, thanks for coming to my TED Talk about why people quit powerlifting. I hope there were some points in there that could benefit you. And like I said at the start, there's nothing wrong with quitting powerlifting, but I think powerlifting and in generally lifting weights is pretty awesome. And so I prefer for people to do it for as long as they can. This video is also the first time trying out a long form format, so let us know what you think of it. And also let us know if there's any topics that you'd like me to cover in the future, as we definitely want to make more of these. That's it. See ya.